you're listening late at night, you might want to stay until the end. Something happened to me, and to this day I can't understand it. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I've been driving the 47 bus for 15 years. 15 years on the night shift. From 10 at night to 5 in the morning, 6 days a week, driving through the same empty streets of Detroit, stopping at the same spots, watching the same shadows move on the wet sidewalks. Have you ever worked the night shift? Then you know, the world changes. The people who get on your bus aren't the same as during the day. They're ghosts of themselves, tired, silent, some in hospital scrubs, others reeking of cheap whiskey, others just empty, staring into nothingness. I learned not to ask questions. I learned to drive on autopilot. Eyes on the road, hands on the wheel, mind switched off. It's the only way to survive the night shift without going crazy. The route is simple. It starts at the Central Terminal, crosses Michigan Avenue, passes through neighborhoods that were once prosperous and are now just abandoned buildings and gas stations with bars on the windows. 23 stops, always the same ones. There's the nurse's stop, stop 7. She comes on every day at 11:15 p.m., never speaks, just nods. She gets off at stop 12, in front of St. Mary's Hospital. There's the drunkard stop, stop 14. He stumbles in, sits at the front, mutters to himself until he falls asleep. He gets off at stop 18, almost always forgetting his backpack. And then there's stop 9. Nobody ever gets on stop 9. It sits on a secluded corner, between an empty parking lot and a disused industrial warehouse. There are no shops, no houses, no decent lighting. Just a flickering yellow lamppost, a rusty metal bench, and a faded sign with the number 9 almost erased. I stop there because the regulations require it. I open the door, wait 10 seconds, close it, and move on. Every night, always empty. Until that night. It was a Tuesday in November, cold. That damp cold that clings to the skin and seeps into the bones. A low fog covered the asphalt, turning the streetlights into diffuse, yellowish blotches. I was tired, more than usual. My ex had called earlier asking for money. My son hadn't answered my calls in weeks. I'd barely slept 3 hours before starting my shift. The nurse got on at stop 7 as usual. The drunk didn't show up. The bus was almost empty, just her and a hoodie-wearing boy listening to music in the back. As I approached stop 9, I didn't even look properly. I was just slowing down out of habit. Brake, door open, 10 seconds, close and go. But this time, something was different. There was someone there. A man standing beneath the lamppost, motionless as a statue. I blinked, thinking it was my imagination. The fog was thick, but no, he was there, standing, waiting. Open the door. He went up. He climbed slowly, very slowly. The bus steps creaked under his weight, but the sound was off, muffled, as if it were coming from very far away. I first saw him under the bus's interior light. A tall, thin man, wearing a worn gray overcoat and a wide-brimmed hat that hid half his face. His clothes looked old. Not vintage. Really old. As if they'd come straight out of an 80s movie. He didn't say anything. He just reached out and put the payment in the box. I looked down. It was a dollar bill, but it wasn't like the ones we have today. It was an old faded bill with a strange texture. The paper was yellowed, almost brittle. It looked decades old. "Sir, this isn't," I started to say. But when I looked up, he was already walking away. He walked down the central corridor without making a sound. None. His feet touched the floor, but it was as if he were floating. He passed the nurse, who didn't even lift her head. He passed the hooded boy, who continued looking at his cell phone, and he went straight to the back of the bus. He sat on the last bench, in the corner, where the light never reaches properly. I stood there for a few seconds, not quite understanding what had happened. I looked at the note in the box. I thought about returning it, but something stopped me. I closed the box lid, took a deep breath, and continued my journey. The temperature inside the bus dropped. It wasn't gradual. It was instantaneous, like someone had turned an air conditioner on full blast. I felt my hair stand on end. I saw my own breath condensing in the air. I looked in the rearview mirror. He was there, motionless, hands on his knees, his hat still covering his face. But something about him was wrong. His posture. The absolute stillness. No human being stays that still. I tried to focus on the road, but my eyes kept returning to the mirror. Once, twice, 3 times. He didn't blink. He wasn't even breathing. The nurse got off at stop 12 without looking back. The hooded boy got off at stop 15. 2 more people got on, an elderly man and a woman with grocery bags. They both sat at the front, away from the back. Nobody looked at him. It was as if they didn't see him. Stop 16, stop 17, stop 18. Everyone else was getting off the bus, but he stayed there. I started sweating. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. The air inside the bus was heavy, dense, like before a storm. There was a strange smell too. Mold, wet earth, something rotten. At stop 20, I looked in the mirror again. He had moved, not much, just a few centimeters. But now he was sitting further forward on the bench, closer to the aisle, and his face, still covered by his hat, was slightly tilted, as if it were watching me. My heart raced. I gripped the steering wheel tightly. I thought about stopping the bus, about turning around and talking to him, about screaming, but my voice wouldn't come out. Stop 21 empty, stop 22 empty. Last stop before the terminal. The door opened. It closed. Nobody went in. Nobody got off. I looked back, turning my head this time, not through the mirror. The bank was empty, completely empty. I breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe he had gotten off without me noticing. Maybe I was just too tired, seeing things. I turned back to the steering wheel, and I looked in the rearview mirror. He was still there, sitting, motionless, looking at me. And this time, I saw his face. There were no eyes, just holes. Dark, empty. I screamed. I stepped on the gas. The bus lurched and sped down the empty avenue. I couldn't stop looking in the mirror. He was still there, sitting there. Those empty holes where his eyes should be, fixed on me. My breath came out in short, desperate bursts. The steering wheel was slippery with sweat. I wanted to stop. You wanted to run away. But my body simply kept driving, as if trapped in an automatic loop. This isn't real, I whispered to myself. You're just tired, that's all. Tired. But I knew he was lying. With each passing second, the cold intensified. My breath formed dense clouds in front of me. The windows began to fog up from the inside, and then I heard it. A sound. Low. Dragged down, like fingernails scraping metal. It came from the back of the bus. My eyes returned to the mirror. He was no longer sitting. He was leaning forward. His long, thin arms hung between his legs. His head was still down, but now swaying slightly from side to side, as if it were sniffing something out. Holy shit, I repeated, my voice faltering. 3 blocks to the terminal. Just 3 blocks. I ran a red light. I didn't care. I needed to get there. I needed light. People. Anything that would prove I wasn't crazy. The sound of fingernails on metal grew louder. And then, it stopped. Absolute silence. I looked in the mirror. The bank was empty again, but I could feel it. I felt the weight of something inside the bus. A suffocating presence, invisible but undeniable. Like when you know someone is looking at you. even without seeing them. "Where are you?" I asked aloud, my voice trembling. "Where are you?" No response, just the roar of the engine. The sound of tires on wet asphalt, and my own panting breath. I arrived at the terminal. I parked haphazardly, braking sharply. I turned on all the interior lights of the bus, every single one of them. The vehicle was illuminated like a stage. I stood up slowly. My legs barely supported me. I started walking down the aisle, looking under each bench, checking every corner. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I reached the back, where he had been sitting. I ran my hand over the seat. It was freezing, too cold, as if it had been sitting in the snow for hours. And there was something else, a brand. It wasn't big, just a dark stain on the worn green upholstery. It felt damp. I touched it with my fingertips. It was cold, slimy, cherry, soil, mold, decomposition. Disgusted, I wiped my hand on my pants and turned around quickly, ready to leave. But when I turned around, I saw the rearview mirror on the roof of the bus. And in it, he was right behind me, just inches from my shoulder. The eyeless face was tilted, almost touching the back of my neck. I yelled and spun around, fists raised, ready to hit, run, anything, nothing. I was alone. I staggered off the bus, tripping on the steps, falling to my knees on the cold asphalt of the terminal. I was breathing as if I'd run a marathon. Tears stung my eyes. 2 security guards came running. "Are you okay, man?" one of them asked, helping me to my feet. I couldn't speak. I just pointed to the bus. They looked. They went in. They searched. "There's no one here," said the other security guard, stepping out and looking at me with concern. "Did you see anyone?" I nodded, but I didn't know what to say. How do you explain something like that? I went home. I took a hot shower. I drank whiskey until the sun came up. I didn't sleep, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw those empty holes staring back at me, and I knew, deep down in my soul, that it wasn't over. I didn't go back to work the following night. I called and said I was sick. It wasn't a lie. I was sick. Sick with fear. Sick with exhaustion. Sick with not being able to distinguish what was real from what wasn't. I spent the whole day locked in my apartment, lights on, television blaring at full volume, anything to fill the silence. Because in the silence, I heard that sound of fingernails scraping metal. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was the chronic insomnia finally taking its toll. Maybe I needed professional help. But then I remembered that stain on the seat, that smell of rotten earth, and I knew I hadn't imagined it. On the second night, the company called me. Either I came back, or I would be fired. 15 years wasted. I needed the job. I needed the money. I had no choice. I went back. Stop 9 was empty when I passed by. Just the flashing yellow lamppost and the low fog. I breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe it had just been one night, an isolated incident. The nurse got on at parade 7. 2 noisy teenagers got on at parade 11. A man in a stained suit got on parade 15. Everything's normal. But when I got close to stop 20, the cold returned. That unnatural cold. Instantaneous. I looked in the rearview mirror. He was there. In the same place. Same gray overcoat. Same hat. Immobile. My stomach churned. My hands began to tremble violently on the steering wheel. "No, no, not again," I murmured, my voice breaking. The teenagers got off at Parada 21, laughing and pushing each other. They didn't even look back. The man in the suit got off at stop 22. He exited distractedly, typing on his cell phone. I was alone with him. Last stop, before the terminal. I opened the door. I waited. The silence was deafening. Only the faint hum of the fluorescent light and my own panting breath. "Come down," I begged, almost crying. "Please, come down." No response. I closed the door. I accelerated. I turned my head back toward the actual hallway, not the mirror. The bank was empty. I turned my eyes back to the road. My heart was beating so fast it hurt in my chest. I looked in the rearview mirror. He was no longer at the bottom. I was in the middle of the hallway, standing, still, rigid, his head tilted at that impossible angle, and he started walking, slowly, one step at a time, toward the front of the bus, towards me. "No!" I yelled, slamming my foot on the gas pedal. The bus sped down the deserted avenue. I ran 2 red lights. The city lights blurred around me. I looked in the mirror again. He was closer, just 3 rows apart, walking, always walking, without hurry, as if he knew I had nowhere to go. My whole body was trembling. Tears streamed down my face. I was sobbing uncontrollably. I turned a corner at high speed. The tires screeched on the asphalt. I almost hit a lamppost. I looked in the mirror, 2 rows apart, and then I saw, underneath the hat, in the distorted reflection of the mirror, it wasn't just the absence of eyes. It was skin, gray, rotten, stretched over prominent bones. The mouth, if it was a mouth at all, opened into a black, jagged hole. He was dead, completely dead. And even so, he kept walking. I arrived at the terminal skidding. I turned on all the lights, opened all the doors, and ran out of the bus before even turning off the engine. I stood outside, sobbing, trembling, screaming for someone to help me. 3 security guards came running. A supervisor appeared soon after. "What happened?" asked the supervisor. "There's someone on the bus," I shouted. "There's someone inside." They went in. They searched, bank by bank. Nothing. "There's nobody here, buddy," said one of the security guards, leaving and looking at me with pity. "Are you sure you're okay?" I looked at the empty bus, at the lights that were on, at the empty seats. And then, slowly, I raised my eyes to the rearview mirror visible through the open door. He was there, sitting in the driver's seat, where I should be, staring at me with those empty holes, waiting. I haven't driven for a week. They said I was under investigation, erratic behavior, shouting in the terminal, passengers complaining that I was driving dangerously. I was forced to see a company psychologist. He prescribed antidepressants. He said it was burnout, post-traumatic stress, chronic insomnia. Everything had a medical explanation. But no medicine could erase what I had seen. Every night, I saw that reflection, not just in the bus mirror, on any shiny surface, on the TV screen when it was turned off, in the bathroom window, on the dark glass of the microwave, always there, standing still, observing. I went back to work because I had no choice, but I asked to change my route. I begged. They denied it. "You're the most experienced driver on line 47, my supervisor said. "We can't just reassign you like that. Line 47, always line 47. On my first night back, I tried to avoid stop 9. I drove straight past it. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, it was still there, as if I'd never needed to go in, as if it had always been with me. I stopped sleeping completely. I stopped eating. I lost 7 kilos in 2 weeks. And then, I found it. I was cleaning out the bus's money box during maintenance. At the bottom, under old coins and receipts, was the banknote, that old bill that he had used to pay. I picked it up with trembling hands. The paper was stained, dark brown, almost black in some places, dried blood. I turned the bill over. On the back, there was something handwritten in faded blue pen, Stop 9, March 14th, 1994. My blood froze. I went home and spent the night researching. Newspaper archives, old police records, anything about that place. I found an article from March 1994. 2 short paragraphs on a page of the Detroit Free Press. Man run over and killed on Michigan Avenue. Witnesses report that a bus on line 47 struck a pedestrian near stop 9 at approximately 2:30 a.m. The driver fled the scene. The victim has been identified as David Brennan, 34 years old. The case is under investigation. I read it again and again. The driver fled. He was never found. And I'm driving the same route, the same bus, the same schedule. Do all the drivers on line 47 see him? Or just me? Last night, I passed by stop 9. He was there, waiting, as always. But this time, I stopped, opened the door. He went up, and when he passed by me for the first time, he turned his face in my direction, and he whispered, just one word. Logo. Tonight is my last night of work. I quit my job. I'm leaving Detroit. I'm going anywhere, far away from here, but I know it won't do any good. Because now, when I look in any mirror, I don't just see him anymore. I see myself sitting next to him, at the back of the bus, property, waiting. Something happened to me 3 months ago, and even today, when I close my eyes, I still see that road. My name is Regis. I'm 43 years old. I've been an interstate bus driver for almost 20 years. I know every curve, every gas station, every dangerous stretch between Ohio and Kentucky. I'm proud of that. I've always been proud of it. It was a Tuesday, early November. I left Cleveland at 11 p.m. bound for Louisville. 18 passengers. Nothing out of the ordinary. Clear skies, empty roads, that heavy silence that only exists after midnight. Most were asleep. Some were on their cell phones. A couple was talking quietly in the first few rows. I like the night. I always have. There's no traffic, no sun in your face, no rush. Just you, the asphalt, and the roar of the engine. It's almost meditative. At 2:30 a.m., I was on Route 23, passing through that stretch of dense forest before Portsmouth. I knew it like the back of my hand. I was about 2 hours from my destination. That's when the GPS recalculated. It wasn't a normal warning. There wasn't that mechanical voice saying, alternate route found. It was just a dry beep, and the screen changed on its own. The blue route line veered to the right, indicating an exit I'd never seen before. I looked at the dashboard. Everything was working. Speedometer normal, fuel level okay, temperature stable. But the GPS insisted, turn right in 800 meters. I was going to ignore it. I swear I was. But then I thought, maybe it's a detour due to construction. Sometimes they update these things and we don't even know about it. Then I will turn around. The entrance was narrow and poorly marked. The asphalt was new, but there were no signs. No mileage indication, no highway number. Nothing. I thought it was strange, but I went along with it. The road went straight, cutting through dense forest on both sides. Dark, very dark. No streetlights, no illuminated shoulder, only the bus headlights piercing the darkness. I looked in the rearview mirror. The passengers remained quiet. Nobody noticed anything, but I realized. Because on that road, there was no sound at all, no wind, no crickets, not even the rustling of trees, just the engine and my breath. And that's when the dashboard clock stopped. 2:47 frozen. I felt a chill run up the back of my neck, and for the first time in almost 20 years on the road, I was scared. I continued driving. I don't know if it was instinct, stubbornness, or simply fear of stopping, but I continued. The road seemed normal at first glance. Smooth asphalt, well-painted lanes, standard width. But there was nothing more to it than that. No signs indicating a nearby town, no safety reflectors on the sides, no kilometer markers. It was as if that road had been built and then forgotten. I looked at the GPS again. The blue line was straight, but the surrounding map was blank. No names, No landmarks, just a line in the middle of nowhere. I tried the radio, pure static. I picked up my cell phone, no signal. Shit, I muttered under my breath. That's when the first passenger spoke up. "Driver?" The voice was weak, somewhat trembling. A woman in the fourth row. "It's very cold back here." I looked at the dashboard. The internal temperature was 22 degrees. "Normal." "The air conditioning is off, ma'am. It must be your imagination." "It's not your imagination," another passenger replied, an older man near the window. "It's really cold, and it has a strange smell." I frowned. "What kind of smell?" Silence. Then, his voice again, lower. "Wet earth, like a cemetery." A chill ran down my spine. I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. "Guys, it's probably just the fog outside. We'll be back on the main highway soon." But I didn't know if that was true, because the fog, it had come out of nowhere, dense, white, clinging to the asphalt like a living thing. The headlights could barely pierce it. I slowed down, 80, 70, 60 km/h, and then I started listening. It wasn't exactly a sound. It was an absence of it, as if the world had been muted. Even the engine's roar seemed muffled, distant, as if it came from underwater. A teenage girl, sitting alone in the middle of the bus, raised her trembling hand. "My cell phone isn't working." Other passengers checked theirs. Same thing. Screens lit up, but no signal, no internet, no correct time. Some digital clocks were flashing 0:00. Others had stopped at random times. "What's happening?" A woman's voice, now genuinely afraid. I didn't know what to say. Then I looked at the dashboard again. The clock remained stopped, 02:47 ARC. But I knew that we had already driven for more than 20 minutes. "Driver, I'm feeling sick." A middle-aged man stood up, clutching his stomach. He was pale and sweating profusely. I need to get off. We can't stop here, sir. There's no shoulder. I'm asking you, please. Sit down, just a little longer." My voice came out harsher than I intended. But I needed to stay in control. I really needed to. The fog grew even thicker, and that's when I saw it. In the rearview mirror, one of the passengers, the woman who complained about the cold, was looking out the window, but not with curiosity, with terror. Her eyes were wide open. Her mouth was slightly open. Her hands trembled against the glass. I was going to ask her what she had seen. But then I looked ahead, and the road had changed. It was no longer smooth asphalt. It had cracks, holes, weeds growing on the edges, as if it had been abandoned for years. My heart raced. I stepped on the brake, and in that suffocating silence, with 18 people staring at me in the rearview mirror, I finally admitted it out loud. "We're lost." Nobody said anything for about 5 seconds. Then, chaos. "And what do you mean, lost? You're the driver. How can you not know where we are?" "I have an appointment early tomorrow. I need to get there. My son is waiting for me, for God's sake." Silence. My voice echoed inside the bus. Everyone froze. I took a deep breath. Sweaty hands on the steering wheel. Heart pounding in my ear. I'm going to turn around. We'll go back to Route 23 and continue our journey as normal. Stay calm. But when I looked in the side mirror, there was nothing behind me. Just fog. The road we had just walked along had disappeared. I swallowed hard. I turned the steering wheel slowly, searching for space to maneuver. The bus swerved heavily, its tires making a muffled thud on the cracked asphalt. The fog swirled around like smoke. That's when I saw the fork in the road. In the middle of the road, 2 directions. U-law, that it wasn't there before. 2 identical roads. Same width, Same broken asphalt, disappearing into the white mist. "Which side do I take?" I asked quietly, more to myself, but someone answered, "The left." I looked in the rearview mirror. It was a man in a suit, sitting alone in the back. He hadn't spoken yet. Pale face, sunken eyes. He was looking out the window, not at me. "How do you know?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just kept looking outside. I felt a chill. I took the right. The bus moved slowly. Visibility was almost zero. I could barely see 3 meters ahead. The headlights seemed useless against that dense, almost solid fog. And then I heard it. A low, continuous sound, like a breath. It wasn't coming from inside the bus. It was coming from outside. "Are you all hearing this?" I asked. No one answered, but I could see from their faces that they were listening. The teenager began to cry softly. A woman in front prayed in a trembling voice. The man who had fallen ill was bent over, his hands on his head. And that's when the woman in the 4th row screamed, "There's someone over there!" Everyone turned towards her window. I looked too. In the middle of the woods, among the trees, there was a silhouette. Stop, completely immobile. Human form, but incorrect. Limbs too long. Head tilted at an odd angle. She didn't move. She just watched. "Keep driving." The man in the suit's voice came from the back, too calmly. "Don't look back." I stepped on the gas. The bus gained speed. 60, 70, 80, but the figure was still there, always at the same distance, always visible among the trees, as if it were accompanying agent. "This isn't real," someone murmured. "This can't be real." But it was. We were all watching. And then she disappeared. Suddenly, without warning, he just vanished. Some sighed with relief. Others continued crying. I maintained my speed, eyes fixed on the road, until the GPS emitted a sound, a long, high-pitched beep that hurts the ears. I looked at the screen, and my blood ran cold, because where the map should have been, there was only flashing text. "You shouldn't be here." The screen went black, and at that moment, the bus engine failed. He coughed. He choked. "No, no, no," I murmured, trying to maintain control. The bus slowed down, 60, 50, 40, and it stopped. In the middle of the fog, in the middle of a road that didn't exist, absolute silence. I turned around. 18 pairs of eyes were staring at me, with fear, with despair. A small child, whom I hadn't even noticed was there, tugged at her mother's sleeve and pointed to the window. "Mom, there are people outside." Everyone looked, and around the bus, stopped in the fog. There were figures, dozens of them. Real estate, waiting. I couldn't breathe properly. The figures were there, still. Human silhouettes shrouded in mist, but none of them moved. You couldn't see faces. You couldn't see details. Only shapes. Immobile. Like forgotten statues in the middle of nowhere. "Lock the doors," someone whispered. I had already done that. My hand trembled as I turned the ignition key again. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. The engine wouldn't start. "Please, God," I prayed softly. "Please." I spun around again. The engine hummed, weakly, but it started. A collective sigh of relief swept through the bus. I pressed the accelerator slowly. The bus began to move. The figures remained still, motionless as we passed by them. "Don't look at them." The man in the suit's voice came from the back, firm. "Nobody looks." But it was impossible not to look, because they were everywhere, on the sides of the road, between the trees, some so close they almost touched the bus, and all of them turned towards us. The teenager buried her face in her coat. The woman continued praying, louder now, her voice broken. The man who had fallen ill vomited in the hallway. No one complained. I accelerated, 70, 80, 90 car kilometers. The fog began to lift. And that's when I saw it. In the middle of the road, a woman. Her back is turned. White dress, dirty with mud. Long, black hair covering her back. Bare feet on the asphalt. She was standing still, completely motionless. "There's someone in front," shouted a passenger. I had already seen it. I slammed on the brakes. The bus skidded, tires screeching. We stopped about 5 meters from it. Nobody said anything. The woman didn't move. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. She remained with her back turned, still. "Horn," someone suggested. I hesitated, but then I honked the horn. Twice. Short and sharp. The sound echoed down the empty road, and the woman turned her head, just the head, 180 degrees, without moving the body, without moving your shoulders. Just the head, turning, slowly, until it's facing us. But where there should be a face, there was only darkness, empty, deep, like a hole. The teenager started screaming. Others joined her. I floored the accelerator. The bus drove straight towards her, and at the last second, she'd disappeared. It vanished into thin air, like smoke. I walked right past the place where she had been. There was nothing there. Not a mark on the ground. Not a sign that anything had been there. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, she was behind the bus, stopped in the middle of the road, back turned again, watching us leave. "Faster!" someone shouted. "Go faster!" I was already at my limit. The engine groaned. The bus shook violently. The asphalt was crumbling, huge potholes, cracks that looked like claws scratching the ground, and the forest, it was closing in. Trees leaning into the road, low branches scraping the roof of the bus, roots sprouting from the asphalt. It was as if the road was Viva and that he was trying to arrest us. "We're going to die here," a woman screamed, in total panic. "No, you won't," I yelled back, more to myself than to her. "No, you won't." And then, the fog has lifted, all at once, like someone opening a curtain. And in front, a sign. Old, rusty, but legible. Portsmouth, 15 miles. I almost cried. The road began to change. The asphalt became smooth again. The cracks disappeared. The trees receded. And when I looked at the GPS, it was working, showing Route 23, normal, as if nothing happened. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. 06:51. 4 hours had passed. But for us, it had only been 20 minutes. I pulled the bus over to the first shoulder I saw. I turned off the engine, and I put my hands to my face. I was trembling. Everyone was there. Nobody said anything for a long time. Then the man in the suit stood up, grabbed his backpack, and walked to the door. "Can you open it?" he asked calmly. I opened it. He got off the bus. He looked at me one last time. Empty eyes. No emotion. "You shouldn't have turned right." And he left. He disappeared by the side of the road. I never saw him again. I stood there for another 10 minutes or so, engine off, hands still trembling on the steering wheel. The passengers began to move slowly, like someone waking from a nightmare and still not sure if they were awake. Some wept softly. Others just stared straight ahead, expressionless. The teenager hugged her backpack as if it were a shield. The woman who was praying continued murmuring prayers. Nobody talked about what had happened. It was as if talking made it all too real. I started the engine again. It worked normally. No problems, no stalling. I drove on to Portsmouth. I stopped at the first gas station I found. Lights on, normal cars filling up, people buying coffee. Everything mundane, everything safe. When I opened the doors, half the passengers got off immediately, without taking their luggage. Without telling anyone, they just left. I called taxis for some people. Others called relatives. One woman simply started walking down the highway, and I didn't have the courage to follow her. Gradually, the bus emptied. When it was just me left, I looked at the back seat, empty. The man in the suit had disappeared before we got here, but I swear I didn't see him get off the bus. I picked up my cell phone, full signal, correct time, 7:14 a.m. I called the company. "Regis, dude, where are you? You should have arrived an hour ago." I didn't know what to say. I had a problem on the road. What kind of problem? Silence. How was I going to explain? Detour. GPS malfunctioning. I'm already in Portsmouth. My supervisor huffed, annoyed, but didn't push me. He told me to go to Louisville as soon as possible. I hung up, and I sat there, alone, in the silence of the empty bus. I tried to convince myself it was just tiredness. A collective hallucination, carbon monoxide, anything. But I knew the truth. We all knew. I opened the GPS. I went to the route history. I looked for the road we took. I had nothing. The log showed that I had gone straight along Route 23. No detours, no recalculating, as if that road had never existed. I felt a chill run down my spine. I picked up my phone again and opened Google Maps. I zoomed in on the area between Cleveland and Portsmouth. I searched. For almost half an hour. Nothing. No back roads. No unmapped detours. It was as if that place had been erased, or it could never have existed. I drove to Louisville on autopilot. I returned the bus. I picked up my belongings. I went home. I didn't tell my wife anything, nor my children. What was I going to say? That I got lost on a ghost road? That I saw a faceless woman? That time stopped. They would think I'd gone crazy. So I kept it. I buried it deep. But 3 weeks later, I received a message. Unknown number. No text, just a photo. It was the rusty license plate, the one we saw when we left the road. Portsmouth, 15 miles. And below the photo, a single sentence. "You saw her too, didn't you?" My heart raced. I tried calling the number. "It's out of service." I tried to reply to the message. It didn't deliver, but I knew who it was. One of the passengers. Someone who also couldn't forget. It's been 3 months now. I still drive. I still take the same route, Cleveland to Louisville, there and back. But I never took that stretch of road again after 2 a.m. And whenever the GPS recalculates, I ignore it, always. Because now I know. There are places that don't appear on the map, roads that shouldn't exist. And if you go inside them, maybe I won't come back, or maybe it will come back different. I look at the clock sometimes, when it strikes 2:47 a.m., and I swear, for a second, he freezes, just for a second. But I see, and on those nights, when I'm driving alone in the dark, I feel it. Someone in the back seat, observing, waiting. I never look in the rearview mirror. Never. Because I know. If I look, he will be there, in a suit, empty eyes, smiling. Something happened to me, and to this day, I can't understand it. My name is David. I'm 42 years old, and I've been driving buses for 18 years, Route 307, overnight shift, north outskirts of Detroit. It's the kind of route nobody wants to take. Forgotten neighborhoods, poorly lit streets, people you'd rather not look in the eye. But I don't mind. In fact, I prefer it that way. The overnight shift has one good thing. It's honest. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. Empty, cold, silent. I used to work during the day. I had a wife, a routine, plans. That ended a long time ago. After the divorce, I requested a transfer to the night shift. It's easier to deal with silence than with questions. And in the night shift, nobody asks anything. Bus line 307 leaves the terminal at 3:30 a.m. and ends at 5:15. 45 stops. Most are empty. Every now and then, someone gets on, a worker going to their shift, a lost drunk, a nurse returning from the hospital. Tired people. People who don't want to talk. Perfect. That Tuesday, I was on my last leg of the journey. It was past 5 in the morning. The sky was beginning to lighten, but it was still dark enough to feel the weight of the night. You know when the air gets thick, when it seems like something is about to happen, but it never does. That's how it was. I'd been alone on the bus for about 20 minutes. Not a single passenger since the stop near the municipal cemetery. I always thought it was strange that they put a bus stop there, but oh well. It's not up to me to decide these things. The engine creaked. The bus was old, a model from the 90s. It smelled of diesel and burnt rubber. The seats were torn. The air conditioning hadn't worked for months, but it still ran. And that's what mattered. I was almost at the terminal when I saw something strange. A bus stop sign. He shouldn't be there. I know this line like the back of my hand. Every corner, every traffic light, every pothole in the street. And that bus stop. I'd never seen that bus stop before. I stared through the windshield as I approached. The license plate was crooked, rusty, as if it had been forgotten there for decades. And underneath it, standing on the sidewalk, was a woman. She was holding a child's hand. I should have walked straight past. I don't know why. But I didn't. I stopped the bus. The door opened with a metallic creak. She went up slowly, pulling the child by the hand. She didn't look at me. She didn't say anything. She just went through the turnstile, which didn't even beep, and sat in the first row, on the right. The child sat next to her, leaning against the window. I waited. Normally, people say something. A good morning. Thank you. Anything. But she didn't say anything, and neither can the child. I closed the door and walked on. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The woman had her head down, her hair covering her face. The child was looking out the window, motionless. That's when I realized the bus was not empty. There were other people sitting on the benches at the back. 5, maybe 6. I hadn't seen anyone go up. I felt a tightness in my chest. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Maybe they had gotten on at the previous stop and I simply hadn't noticed. It happens. After so many years of driving, sometimes you go on autopilot. Your eyes see, but your brain doesn't register. But something didn't add up. I looked in the rearview mirror again. They were there, sitting, motionless. None of them were using their cell phones. None of them were looking out the window. None of them were blinking, just sitting down. I felt a chill run up the back of my neck. The bus drove along the empty avenue. The streetlights flickered weakly, some already burned out. Fog began to form near the ground, creeping between the abandoned buildings. Detroit is like that, entire neighborhoods that seem to have been forgotten by time. But that was different. The silence was wrong. Normally, even in the middle of the night, you hear something. The rumble of the engine, the screeching of the brakes, the wind hitting the car's body. But at that moment, everything seemed muffled, as if the sound had been sucked out of the air. I tried to focus on the road. 3 more stops and I'd be at the terminal. 3 more stops and I could go home, take a hot shower, and forget about that night. But when I passed the next point, something made me stop again. Someone was waiting. A man, in a suit, standing under the sign, with his hands in his pockets. I slowed down. He didn't wave. He didn't make any sign. He just stood there, looking at the bus. I stopped. The door opened. He went up. He didn't look at me. He didn't pay the fare. He just walked to the back and sat down. I closed the door and walked on. My heart was racing now. I could feel the sweat running down my back, despite the cold. I looked in the rearview mirror again. They were all there, sitting, motionless, and none of them were breathing. I know because I was paying attention, observing, waiting to see some movement, his chest rising and falling, his head bobbing with the swaying of the bus. Anything. Nothing. They were completely still. like mannequins. I swallowed hard and gripped the steering wheel tightly. Everything's fine, I told myself. You're just tired. That's all. But I knew he was lying. I tried turning on the company radio. I turned the knob, just static, a constant, high-pitched hiss that pierced my ears. I hung up. I looked at the GPS on the dashboard. The screen was black, dead. I knew the route. I didn't need GPS. But even so, it made me nervous. I moved on. The streets were deserted. No cars, no pedestrians, only the bus gliding through the ghost town. And then I saw the same bus stop sign, the same rusty, warped, unusable license plate. I had already been there. I was sure of it, but it was there again. And below her, standing on the sidewalk, was another person, a girl. She couldn't have been more than 16 years old. White dress, wet hair. She looked directly at me, and she smiled. I didn't stop. I floored the accelerator. The engine groaned, but the bus picked up speed. I looked in the rearview mirror. The woman in the front row turned her head, slowly, and he looked at me. His eyes were completely black. I let out a muffled cry and looked away. When I looked again, she had her back to me again, as if nothing had happened. But now I knew. That wasn't real, or worse, it was too real. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. I tried to breathe slowly, in a controlled manner, but my chest was tight. The air inside the bus was freezing now. It wasn't the normal chill of the early morning. It was something different, piercing, as if it came from deep within my bones. I looked at the speedometer, 40 miles per hour, but it felt like I was driving in slow motion. The streets passed by, but at the same time, they didn't. As if I were stuck in a loop. I needed to talk to someone. "Excuse me," I said, loud enough for the woman to hear. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Nothing. She kept her head down, her hair covering her face. The child next to her didn't move. "Hey," I said louder this time. "Is anyone back there?" Silence. A silence so profound that I could hear my own heart beating. And then, I heard something. A low sound. Almost imperceptible. Breathing. But it wasn't mine. It was slow. Heavy. As if it were coming from all sides at once. I looked in the rearview mirror. The passengers in the back remained motionless, but now, I could see something different. They were looking at me. All of them. Without moving her head. Without blinking. Just her eyes, fixed on me through the mirror. I felt my stomach churn. I stepped on the brake. The bus lurched violently and stopped in the middle of the street. I expected to hear complaints, the sound of people falling out of their seats, some kind of reaction. Nothing. Nobody wavered. Nobody complained. They just stayed there, sitting, motionless, looking. "What do you want?" My voice came out trembling, desperate. No response. I turned in my chair, looking directly at them now. 5 people, or something resembling people. A man in a suit, a woman in a hospital uniform, 2 teenagers, and an older man in a baseball cap. Their faces were pale, expressionless, their eyes empty, and they were all looking at me. I tried to open the door. I pressed the button. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. The door didn't open. I punched the dashboard. "Open up, damn it. Open up!" The bus engine died. Everything went dark. Only the sound of my panting breath echoing in the silence. And then, the lights came back on, weak, blinking. I looked out the window. I was in a different place. It wasn't the avenue anymore. These weren't the streets I knew. It was a bridge, an old, rusty metal bridge suspended over a dark river. I knew that bridge. My blood froze. I knew that damned bridge. I tried to start the engine. I turned the key. Nothing. I tried again and again, until The engine started. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. But when I looked ahead, I saw something that made me want to scream. The bus was moving, alone. I wasn't pressing the accelerator. I wasn't touching anything, but the bus kept going, slowly, deliberately, towards the center of the bridge. No, 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 no. I tried to brake. I pressed the pedal hard. Nothing. The bus didn't stop. I looked in the rearview mirror. The woman in the front row was standing now. She was coming towards me, slowly, step by step. I tried to get out of the chair, but my body wouldn't obey. It was as if I were trapped, paralyzed. She stopped beside me, and finally, he raised his face. It wasn't a face. It was a dark blotch. No eyes, no mouth, just empty. She leaned towards my ear, and he whispered, "Do you remember?" I started screaming. I woke up. I thought I had woken up. I was back behind the wheel. The bus was running normally. The lights were on. The engine was humming softly. I looked around, breathless. The bridge had disappeared. I was back on the streets of Detroit, but they weren't the same streets, or maybe they were. I couldn't be sure of anything anymore. The fog was thicker now. It covered everything like a gray sheet. The streetlights could barely pierce it. I looked in the rearview mirror. The woman was sitting in the front row again, head down, motionless. The child next to her continued looking out the window, and the others were there, sitting, quiet, as if nothing had happened. I wanted to believe it had been a nightmare, a delusion, extreme exhaustion, perhaps a hallucination. But I knew it wasn't, because I could still smell it. Stale water, rust, something organic decomposing. I looked at the dashboard. The digital clock read 5:47 in the morning. Impossible. I had left the terminal at 3:30. The entire route took a maximum of 1 hour and 45 minutes. I should have been at the terminal more than half an hour ago, but I kept driving. And then I realized I was passing through the same places, the same corner with the broken lamppost, the same abandoned building with boarded-up windows, the same convenience store with the sign flashing, open 24 hours. I was walking in circles. Where the hell am I? I muttered to myself. I tried turning onto a different street. I turned the steering wheel, but the bus didn't flip over. He kept going, straight ahead, as if he had a will of his own. I let go of the steering wheel. It kept turning on its own, guiding me back along the same path, to the same damn route. I felt tears burning my eyes. "What do you want from me?" I yelled. "What do you want?" And then, she moved. The woman in the first row. Slowly, she turned her face towards me. This time, I could see. She was crying. Tears streamed down her pale face. But there was no sound, only the silent movement of her lips. She was saying something. I couldn't hear, but I could read. "Please, please, please." I looked away, trying to ignore it, trying to focus on the road. But then, the child stood up. She let go of the woman's hand and walked into the hallway. He stopped in the middle of the bus, and he turned his face towards me. He was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Brown hair, small, delicate face. He raised his hand, and he pointed forward. I looked where he was pointing. There was a sign on the road. Last stop, 307. I recognized that sign. I knew that place. It was the end point, the terminal. But it wasn't the terminal I knew. It was different, dark, empty. As if it had been abandoned for decades. The bus began to slow down, alone. I was no longer in control of anything. He stopped right under the sign. The engine died. The lights flickered. And then, everything went silent. An absolute silence. Suffocating. I closed my eyes. I squeezed them tightly. I prayed that when I opened them, it would all be over. I counted to 10. I took a deep breath, and I opened my eyes. The bus was empty, completely empty. The woman had disappeared. The child had disappeared. The passengers in the back seat, they had all disappeared. Except for something on the front row seat. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling. I walked there. There was something folded up on the seat where the child was sitting. A piece of paper, a ticket. I picked it up with trembling hands. Shelter. Yes, the paper was old, yellowed. The edges were torn, as if it had been stored for years. And in the center, handwritten in faded blue pen, there were only 3 things. Line 307, October 23rd, 2008, 11 dead. My breath stopped. I knew that date. God, I knew that date. My fingers started shaking so much that I almost dropped the paper. October 23rd, 2008, at 5:23 a.m., a bus on line 307 went off the road on the Gratiot Bridge, crossed the guardrail, and fell into the Detroit River. The driver survived. 11 passengers died. I remember reading about it in the newspapers. I remember seeing the images on television, the bus being pulled from the water days later, the family members crying, the flowers left on the bridge. I remember feeling relief, because it wasn't my shift. It wasn't my route. I was safe. But now, holding that note in my hands, something began to unravel inside my head. A memory I didn't want to remember. A memory that I had buried so deep that I had convinced myself it had never existed. But she was coming back. In pieces. I was driving that night. It wasn't another driver. It was me. I remember now. The tiredness, the heavy sleep, my eyelids closing on their own. I remember seeing the bridge ahead, and from having closed her eyes, just for a second. Just a second. When I woke up, it was already too late. The steering wheel slipped from my hands. The bus swerved sharply. I heard screams. I felt the impact against the guardrail. And then, the fall. Cold water flooding the bus. The sound of breaking glass, of twisting metal. I managed to get out. I swam to the surface, but they couldn't. The woman in the hospital uniform, the man in the suit, the 2 teenagers, the man in the cap, and the woman with the child. They were all on the bus. They all died. Because of me. I dropped the ticket on the floor. My whole body was trembling. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. My throat was closed up. I looked around the empty bus, and then I heard it. Steps, coming from abroad. I looked out the window. They were there, all of them, standing in front of the bus, looking at me. The woman in uniform, the man in the suit, the teenagers, the man in the cap, and the woman with the child. She was holding his hand, but now she was smiling. It wasn't a smile of anger. It wasn't revenge. It was peace, as if they could finally move on. The child waved at me, and then they began to dissolve, slowly, like smoke, until nothing remained but the fog. I stood there, alone, in the middle of that ghost terminal, and finally, I understood. I had never left that night. I had died along with them. But unlike them, I couldn't accept it. So I was stuck, driving the same route every night, forever, until he finally remembered. Until I finally faced what I had done. I looked in the rearview mirror, and for the first time in years, I saw myself. I really saw myself. A pale face, empty eyes. I was like them. I always have been. I sat back down in the driver's seat. I put my hands on the steering wheel, and I waited, because I know that tomorrow night, the bus will leave the terminal again at 3:30 in the morning, Line 307, and I'll be here, driving, waiting for the last stop. That never arrives. If you work the night shift, tell me where. And if you've ever been through something similar, you already know what to do.